Property of mind, it gets a little bit more theoretical because we're talking about ownership of the intangible, right? Because your brain is really part of your property of body, but your mind is really more, when I say you have property of mind, what I'm saying is that you own your consciousness. You own your thoughts, you own your decisions, you own your free will, okay? So, let's talk about the bundle of sticks. The first in the bundle of sticks was the right to control. And with property of mind, I think that one of the best illustrations of the right to control is freedom of religion. So you get to decide what you believe, what God you worship, or to not worship a God, or to be, I don't know, like a Wiccan or something, or to be a Scientologist, or whatever you want. You control your mind, so you get to decide what you believe. What do you think is true? What do you have faith in? So that's the foundation of freedom of religion. And also the idea that you have ideological or political freedom, right? Because I talk a lot about commies, all right? And I don't like commies. So I'm not a big fan. But I'm also not like a Pinochet type. I'm not trying to have people thrown from helicopters for having differing political views from me. So you have political freedom because you get to control your mind, you know? Edgar, he's further along on the liberty spectrum than me, probably. And I call myself a propertarian. I guess technically that makes me like a minarchist. But you know, everyone can believe what they want to believe, ideologically, politically, whatever, that's your freedom. You control your mind. And that gets me into something a little bit more dicey, and it makes people uncomfortable, even people who are big advocates of freedom of speech, and that is the freedom to hate. And this gets me into some stuff about hate crimes in general. I don't think that hate crimes should be a thing. Now, that's not because I don't think hate crimes exist, it's just because I think that most violent crimes are driven by hate. It's not, let me put it this way. By making something a hate crime, you're actually criminalizing thought. Because you're making a crime worse because of the intent that the person had at the time, right? So instead of it just being, you're a murderer, if you murdered somebody because they're black, then it's also a hate crime. But in my opinion, that's a thought crime, and we shouldn't be criminally punishing people for their thoughts, because they own their thoughts, and their thoughts in and of themselves don't hurt anyone and don't infringe on anyone else's opinion in and of themselves. Like, just holding hatred for someone actually really only hurts the person that's holding hate until they actually act on it. So if you kill someone out of hate, that's really bad. Don't commit murders, and definitely don't kill someone just because they're black. That's like racist as fuck. Don't do that, okay? Like, really, don't do that. But the fact that you did it because of racist reasons shouldn't make it more of a crime than if you did it for financial reasons, or because, like, I don't know, they cheated on, or they like slept with your spouse or something like that. The why you did it should not be a reason why you should get punished more, in my opinion, because that violates your freedom of mind and your control. The next thing with that is the freedom to associate. And this is kind of control and enjoy, you know. But this is, you get to choose who your friends are. You get to choose who you like. You know, it's sort of the opposite of the freedom to hate. The freedom to like, the freedom to love. Because that's all your mind. That's not your body or your personal property or anything. That's all your consciousness and your mind that decides who you love, who you're attracted to, who you want to spend time with. And this is also why I think it's really dangerous when people start to say that because you're associated with a certain person, you bear their guilt. Right? Because that kind of infringes on your freedom of association, because what that's saying is that what someone else does applies to you just because you chose to associate with them. But really, you should be free to associate with whoever you want, and you're not responsible for what somebody else does, no matter who you associate with. You're only responsible for yourself. So yeah, and obviously that gets into a bit of like the whole sexuality situation, right? If you have the freedom to associate, if you have freedom of mind, you know, you have the free will to be in a gay relationship, to have gay relations. You know, it's not, that is a consenting act between two adults who, you know, mentally are in a state of mind where they're enjoying that. You know, that's their right to enjoy their mind. That's their consciousness. That's their choice. And we certainly should not be using the hand of government to control sexuality. And I think that while like the gay rights movement has actually freed sexuality for gays, in many ways, the most recent feminist movement has restricted sexuality for heterosexuals. So, and what I mean by that is, I don't know if Edgar's heard about these, but there's people on college campuses and other places who now are requiring someone to sign a consent form before they'll have sex with them or something like that. Or there was some fool on Twitter who said that he literally was going to ask a woman if it was okay to proceed through every step of the sexual process. So he would be like, is it okay to touch your hand? Is it okay to hug you? Is it okay to kiss you? Is it okay to touch your breast? Is it okay to, you know? And I could not think of anything less sexy than that.
But it's got to be in writing, so.
Yeah, I know. It's like he's got to take out the pen and paper in between each step. I can't imagine he could stay up that whole time. Anyway. How can you be still aroused if you're like having to get consent? Like legal documents are not sexy. Anyway. I digress.
For most, anyways. Maybe for some, that's the kink.
But yeah, I mean, really, sexuality is part of your property of mind, and that's why, like I'm a devout Catholic, you know. I'm very much straight as well, but it's like we have free will. God gave us free will. And if that's the choice that you make, that's the choice that you make. And no government should be using force against you for making a choice like that, especially with consenting adults. Like it's just, the government should have no say in that whatsoever. Also in the right to enjoy, the right to enjoy your property of mind, I talked a lot about meditation in one of my previous podcasts, but even just like having fantasies, you know, of whatever nature you might fantasize about, but you know, using your mind to have a wild imagination, that's up to you. That's you enjoying your mind. So let's get into some stuff that's like more related to where the government is right now. So you also have the right to exclude from your mind. And I think that we all understand that. And that's why we all get really freaked out by Orwellian kind of dystopian nightmares. That's why all the NSA spying is so chilling, right? And also why kind of the whole cancel culture is so chilling, because in effect, if someone has a microscope on all of your opinions, you know, like if you think something and put it out there, and then, I mean, the whole NSA spying is even worse because it's not even like you're putting it out into the world. Let's just say you're having a private conversation and you happen to be in front of your computer. You know, the idea that the government could be listening in to your most intimate conversations, and like if you're really in a deep conversation with someone, you might be kind of revealing some really personal, deep information. And you have the right to exclude people from those ideas. In some ways, the NSA spying also violates other property rights, like your real property rights, you know, because in effect, they're just like they're trespassing in your home by watching you without your consent, listening in without your consent. So that's kind of where the Fourth Amendment comes in with NSA spying. But it's also the idea of having your thoughts be criminalized or be monitored or any of that all violates your freedom of mind. Like the idea that you would be in a Big Brother situation, like Big Brother's watching you, like that violates your property of mind because you can't actually express what you think without risk of repercussions, even within your own home, right? So it's a really big problem. Oh, this next one's silly. You also have the right to destroy your mind, okay? And I have on here hallucinogenic and other hard drugs. That's what I put in my bullet. That's so silly. But this is partially why I think that all drugs should be legal. I don't think anyone should do hard drugs at all, okay? Like heroin is, people talk about heroin in a way that I really think it might be like almost an evil kind of drug. Like people talk about it like they love it. I don't know, I watched a lot of Intervention. But hard drugs and hallucinogens, I bring up hallucinogens in particular because I'm a big Pink Floyd fan. And for those of you who know Pink Floyd, prior to David Gilmour being their main guitarist, they actually had a guitarist named Syd Barrett, all right? And the other members of Pink Floyd joked that Syd Barrett would put a hit of LSD in his morning coffee every day. And Syd Barrett did so much LSD that he lost his mind. And he lost his mind so badly that he couldn't even be a part of Pink Floyd anymore. And Pink Floyd actually, after Roger Waters, found David Gilmour and they kept going, they actually wrote a whole album about Syd Barrett called Wish You Were Here. And Syd Barrett was there when they recorded that, but he was so out of his mind that he didn't even know what was going on. And that's a really sad story, although quite frankly, I think that David Gilmour vastly improved Pink Floyd because his guitar riffs are partially what makes Pink Floyd what it is and why they're so famous. But, that was Syd Barrett's right to do that. It's his mind to destroy. And I don't encourage anyone to destroy their mind. I think your mind is a great gift. And especially the human mind, we have such capability for creativity and compassion. And, the human mind is an incredible thing. But it is yours to destroy. It's your property. And if you haven't listened to Wish You Were Here, it's a great album. Go listen to it. And then this is one, I always get in so much heat on Twitter for this, especially from the anarchists. So maybe Edgar will get really pissed off at me for this. But I think intellectual property is the right to convey when it comes to your property of mind. Because you do have the right to convey your property of mind. Just like we talked about your freedom of contract or your whole right to work. It's like you get to sell your labor. That's you selling your property of body. So you can also sell your property of mind. And one of the ways that you can do that is through a patent or a copyright or through trademarks. Statist, I know. But I actually think that it's one of the few things that actually is in the Constitution. Like our founders did actually create a governmental, or they actually did give the government the power to enforce property rights because they thought it was important. So there's a property rights clause in the Constitution. They give the authority to Congress. But the reason why I think anarchists get mad is because they say that, especially with the copyright issue, they'll tell me that making a copy is using your own property the way that you want. The issue I have with that, thank you, I could use a water. The issue I have with that is that it's not the other argument they have is that you can't copyright an idea. Like you can't stop someone from recreating an idea. And I agree with that. And copyright doesn't protect ideas because an idea isn't tangible. And for something to be protectable or to be conveyed in terms of your mind, it actually has to become tangible, okay? And so...
What about words? So there's this, I won't call them names, but let's just insert all kinds of expletives there in the gun community.
Okay.
And he actually trademarked the phrase fighting pistol and fighting rifle. Something like that, something to that effect.
And he's in the gun business?
Yeah, so he's an instructor. So now anybody who uses the term fighting pistol or fighting rifle or something to that effect is now basically owes him money just for simply using those.
Now, let me preface, because you make a good point. Let me preface this by saying that I think that the current intellectual property laws are too broad. Like they protect more than they should right now. And especially the way trademarks work, well, no, not just especially, it's in all three. Because the government does have a way of messing stuff up. But you're right, like with that trademark, I'm kind of surprised he was able to get it because it seems a little bit generic to me, you know? Fighting rifle, like how, that seems like something that might be kind of almost common parlance with anyone who's in the gun industry. Now, if he wanted to start like a computer company and call it fighting rifle, that's kind of different. It's sort of like how Apple has a computer company and they call it Apple. Like you could never trademark the word apple unless it was about something that's not that kind of fruit. You know, like if you were an Apple salesman, you couldn't trademark the word apple for your company. But I do think there's something to the idea that if you develop a product, all right, you spend your time, your energy, your mind developing an invention, right? Or let's just say that you are, because let's take something like, I hate some of these big brands though. But let's take something like King Soopers, okay? Like a grocery store. So you...
Or DC.
Huh?
Or DC.
DC. Yeah. It's true. But let's say you open something like a grocery store. And your grocery store, you want people to know when they come to your grocery store that there's a certain level of quality that they can expect, right? You only, like maybe... King Soopers doesn't do this, but let's say you only carry organic products and you stand by that and that's your thing and you create this company and people come to know you for that, right? And when they go to different cities and they see your grocery store, they know they can come to you and that it'll be organic products and it'll be of a certain quality, whatever. Now, if someone sees your success with that and literally takes the exact name of your company, of your brand, the same image, the same logo, and opens a grocery store with that. But they sell whatever products, you know? They're not organic, they're not high quality, the produce is already almost bad, whatever. But now, people go to their store and they might start to think that your grocery stores have that crappy quality. It affects your business. You could lose money because they're trying to parlay what you have created to make themselves money.
That just happened recently. A restaurant in Alamosa found out that a big chain, I got to look it up here in Colorado, opened up I guess, grocery store. Mm-hmm. Food market style, if I'm not mistaken, with...
It was actually a grocery store. Wow,
yeah,
that's crazy.
With same name and virtually the same logo, so it looked like they were connected. Mm-hmm. And that was their gripe. It was just like, you look way too similar.
Right.
And I don't know what the hell you sell. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it kind of gets into the whole freedom to associate, too. It's like, this is my brand, and I don't want my brand to be associated with people who are putting out an inferior product. And you know, brands have value. People on Twitter try to say like, oh, well, Nina, like, what is your brand worth? It's like, well, my brand's not worth crap, okay? No one knows my brand. I'm not talking about me. But Coca-Cola, okay? That logo, the Coca-Cola logo, that is worth a ton. I mean, like if you wanted to put out a soda company, or like let's say if you put out a soda company and you put Coca-Cola's logo on there, and whatever you have in there is just terrible soda. Like it doesn't even taste like cola. It's like worse than RC cola or whatever. You know, you are taking Coca-Cola's brand recognition to sell your product. And you're doing that knowingly, because you wouldn't, there's part of the intellectual property, like to win an intellectual property case, you have to prove that the person knew about your brand or knew about your copyright, whatever, before they, infringed it. So the whole idea is you can't just say, wow, Coca-Cola, everyone knows Coca-Cola. And if I use their logo, people will buy my product. It's like, well, that means that you're taking profit away from Coca-Cola. You're taking away from their company and their business and all of that. And that is stealing, in my opinion, when you do that. I know a lot of militant anarchists on Twitter disagree with me. I was called some of the most horrible names ever for defending intellectual property rights. It's so weird. But I do want to talk about it. And I'll go briefly through copyright and patent just because it's so contentious in the libertarian community that I think it's worth going into.
Yeah, you are wrong, but I mean.
Well, it's okay. You can disagree with me, Edgar. You disagree with me on other stuff too, so it's fine. But at least, hey, calling me wrong's fine. So someone called me like a POS. Just
Oh yeah, people
up.
get stupid.
People get stupid.
For no reason.
And it's like, you know, like, I mean, obviously I'm going to get called a statist anyway because I'm not an anarchist, but people were literally saying that, like, I was advocating for theft, and
people forget that it's okay to disagree.
Yeah, right? Especially on something like IP rights. And I worked at DC Comics. Like, and even right now, like, I'm an intellectual property attorney. Like, I think that IP rights are valid.
And those fuckers steal a lot of ideas.
I steal all my ideas. No, I'm teasing. But I want to talk about copyright too, because I do think our copyright laws right now are too broad, okay? Right now, the way a copyright works is once you put something into a tangible medium. I like to paint. I've been practicing painting, realism and all of that. So once I paint something, it's not just an idea in my head anymore. Now I've expressed the idea into a tangible medium, which is my painting, okay? So in my opinion, if someone made a photocopy of my painting, put their name on it, and started selling it like it was theirs, that would be stealing from me. Because they're saying that the work I did was theirs, and they're profiting from my work. Now, someone would tell me, like I'm going from the arguments that I got on Twitter because I got plenty of them. Now, someone said to me, if I just look at your painting and then recreate it at home, like that's not stealing from you. And I'm like, okay, first of all, the chances that you could just look at a painting and then go home and perfectly recreate it such that it's actually a copy where people would not be able to tell the difference is that's just crazy. That's not realistic. But when I worked at DC Comics, okay, there was an artist, I put that in quotes and you'll find out why. There was an artist in Europe that was literally taking, like squares or like one frame out of our comics, blowing them up and printing them onto a big canvas, splattering them a few times with some paint, and selling them for thousands and thousands of dollars. They were in galleries. I mean, this artist was all over Europe. So now think about that. some people were like, oh, DC Comics, it's such a big company. But the person who actually drew that art isn't DC Comics. It's a comic sketch artist, probably one guy who's working on like a Wacom or something, and someone is using his talent and his skill and his creations to make thousands of dollars by claiming that it was his art. And in my opinion, that's stealing. You made a copy of someone else's work and you sold it like it was yours. But you didn't do anything. You didn't create that. That's not from your mind. And now, here's where I get into where I think copyright goes too far. I don't think derivative works should be protected. I think only copies, direct copies should. And so let me give you an example of that. Like if you write a book, I think that someone should be able to make a movie of that book without getting your permission. Because that's not actually a copy. That's creating a new tangible expression of that idea. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's kind of like the argument that everybody has against Disney being able to extend copyrights, because they were going to come up, and then Disney's like, no, the hell they're not, because then we would have owned Mickey Mouse and we would have owned all of that stuff. The public in general would have owned that. I think there is an argument to be had, or there is an argument for suppression of being able to suppression of the art, because you could only take so much without. Nobody really has any original ideas anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody. Like
everyone's borrowing from someone else.
Correct. So you get to the point where it's just like, holy shit, I really want to make a Mickey Mouse, but if I do it, my own version of this Mickey Mouse, it's going to be funnier, it's going to be whatever, raunchier or whatever. Yeah, we're protected under fair use to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But only for a little bit. I can't create an entire cartoon based off of a Mickey Mouse type character without really following. Unless you're Disney, and then you can steal the Lion King, and then nobody's going to tell you anything.
Well, Disney's destroying its own intellectual property right now. It's just in the process of burning its own intellectual property to the ground. But you're right. That's one of the other places where I think copyright law is too excessive, is that it lasts too long. Because right now, and when the Copyright Act was first written, it was the life of the author plus 50 years. But then Sonny Bono was like, that's not enough, and was able to get it extended to the life of the author plus 70 years. But to me, the problem with that is that there's just no chance that you'll be able to make a derivative work off of anything that was created in your lifetime, even if it was created by someone way older than you. So personally, I think because it's such a, real property, personal property, property of body, all of that is so tangible, right? But even property of body kind of ends upon your death. And I think that property of mind probably should too. Because I also don't like how, the heirs of all of these, really imaginative people are just using those copyrights to sue the crap out of anyone who tries to do anything similar. Like Marvin Gaye's heirs will sue anyone who makes a song that sounds even slightly close to anything that Marvin Gaye ever made.
And Blurred Lines sounds nothing like a Marvin Gaye song.
I mean, in terms of music theory, because I do have a background in musicology, because of that, I see why they thought it was similar. Like why a musicologist or a music theorist could argue they were similar. But to the average ear, you would never think that. Same with Ed Sheeran and Marvin Gaye. Ed Sheeran got sued too. Yeah, they do it all the time. And although I have to say, Robin Thicke and Pharrell did not do themselves any favors during that litigation, because Pharrell was just like, you can't copyright a groove, man. And then the court was like, yeah, you can. So that wasn't smart.
We just did.
Yeah, it's like, he did copyright it, and that's why you're getting sued. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the issue. I think it's too broad right now. Even when our founders wrote the intellectual property clause, they put in there for limited times. And so to me, the author's life plus 70 years, I mean, that's not that limited. The other thing with Disney, you mentioned Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is going to go into the public domain 70 years after his death regardless. But why Disney can still protect it is because of trademark. They trademarked Mickey Mouse. So, and that's one of those things where I'm not sure if a character, like that's where trademark gets a little bit expansive, right? It's like, is it really a brand mark, like Mickey Mouse as an image? But that's how they're going to keep enforcing people to not be allowed to use Mickey Mouse. They're going to use trademark law because trademarks don't expire. And trademarks weren't in the intellectual property clause. And that's why trademarks are so broad, because it was just created by statute.
But trademarks, you can kind of change a few things and not be in violation of trademarks.
Correct. It just has to be different enough that the public wouldn't get confused.
Correct. And
So,
copyright, on the other hand, is just like almost any similarities to a certain degree. And
it has to be. It has to reach a certain amount of similarity. I think the technical phrasing is substantially similar. But the only reason why they even have to say it, and that's why I talk about that artist in Europe, right? Because he did technically change it a little bit. He made it bigger, and he splattered a couple, paints, sprays on it. But ultimately, it's really not that different. Like, he didn't actually transform it into something new. The vast majority of it was someone else's work. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I am very much in favor of, some reform in our intellectual property, because I think that it's too broad right now, and the intellectual property litigation sucks so much money out of the system that just does not need to be sucked out. And it's so restrictive that I think that people's creativity is being impeded right now. But that doesn't mean that I think that they should be abolished outright, because intellectual property rights are the only way that artists, musicians, movie makers, all these people can convey their property of mind, and that is actually their labor. That's their freedom of contract in some ways, is to be able to profit off of their creations. And I stand by that, especially with inventions, And again, with derivative works, like if you take an invention and modify it and it becomes a new thing, I think that should be okay. But if you literally take the exact same product, the exact same invention, and then sell it like it's yours when you didn't invent it, then I think that's stealing. So, because I think that if you're an inventor, you should be able to profit from your inventions. Inventions change the world, man. It shouldn't be a situation where just because you invent something, now everyone else just gets to use your secret sauce and make it. But I also don't think that you should be the only one who is allowed to use the secret sauce forever. It should be limited, because we need to develop and grow with stuff, And I also think that it's important that, like, for capitalism to really work, people need to be able to build off of each other's inventions. So you can't restrict someone completely from using your inventions, your creativity, all of that. But you also can't prevent someone from being able to profit from it, or from stopping someone from selling their work as theirs when they didn't make it. That's the part that I think is theft. But I don't know.
yeah, free market wise, it'd be like, well, if your version of it is better, then the free market should decide whether you deserve it or not. Like, good on you for inventing it, but the free market should decide
Right.
whether
And that's,
AC or DC is better.
and that's why I say, like, if it's the exact same product, that's a problem. But if you make a better product, that's how Pepsi can exist, even though Coke exists, because it's actually not the same product, Pepsi tweaked Coke or whatever. but But yeah, so I don't know. I hope to the extent that I have anarchists watching this who do follow me on Twitter and called me like a horrible status bigot or something, maybe at least people have a better understanding of why I think that intellectual property rights should exist. I do think though that when I say that, people assume that I'm giving I'm green-lighting everything in our current intellectual property law. But that's not necessarily what I mean. I just think that in general, intellectual property rights are valid, but I do think our government, as with almost everything our government does, has fucked that up and has made it really messy. They've made it more complicated than it needs to be, and they've made it, I don't know, I think the reason why people are against IP rights is because of how broad our government has made them and how restrictive our government has made them.